Hi, I'm Rusty Komori, and this is Beyond the Lines on ThinkTech Hawaii. I was the head coach of the Punahou School boys varsity tennis team for 22 years, and we were fortunate to win 22 consecutive state championships. This show is based on my books, Beyond the Lines and Beyond the Game, and it's about inspiration, dealing with adversities, and building a superior culture of excellence. My special guest today is a Honolulu police officer and leader of Crime Stoppers Honolulu. He is Sergeant Chris Kim, and today we are going way beyond adversity. Hey, Sergeant Chris, welcome back to Beyond the Lines.
Hi, Rusty. Thank you for having me again.
Sergeant Chris, you've been doing such incredible work in our community, but I want to first ask, before leading Crime Stoppers, what were some of the assignments that you were a part of?
I joined the police department and I kind of went through the different patrol divisions. And then in 2010, I came up to the criminal investigation divisions where I worked through the various details, sex crimes detail, domestic violence. My last assignment just prior to the Crime Stoppers program was a homicide detective. And then I took over Crime Stoppers in 2017.
Now, Sergeant Chris, when you worked in the homicide detail, what did you see regarding suicides?
It was always tragic cases where I would respond to these scenes with my partner, and we would see people of all ages, young, old, that a lot of times where they're just distraught, going through some hard times in their life. Oftentimes it was just due to failed relationships, whether it be boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or what have you. But just very, very sad, beautiful, good looking people just tragically ended up committing suicide just because they couldn't deal with the pain anymore.
Wow. Man, I don't know how you guys can really, investigate those. It's so heart-wrenching. And Sergeant Chris, I want to ask you if you can share about the lowest point you experienced in your life.
Well, it would have to be back in the latter part around September 2016. I was assigned as a detective in the homicide detail. Life was great. I was married for 10 years, 2 kids in private school. I had my dream home that we had just moved into in Hawaii, right oceanfront. I had the dream life looking back on it. But then I started to notice some behavioral changes in my wife at that time. And I started feeling a little bit more distant and just things seemed out of place. And eventually I found out that she was having an affair. And I just remember just being filled with just so much sadness and pain. Never ever thought that something like that would happen to me. I remember in the academy, they used to talk about how at one point police officers had a high rate of divorce. And I didn't want to be that statistic. And so I wanted to try and work things out, try and figure out what the cause was, what led to those actions. But unfortunately, after trying for a couple months of counseling, it wasn't working out. And that's where I had to face the reality that my marriage was coming to an end. And Rusty, it's looking back on it, it's just strange because as a homicide detective, I remember I used to respond to these scenes where these boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or what have you had committed suicide because they either had broken up or someone was having an affair or some divorces involved. And I remember at that time, I used to tell myself and my partner that, these people are like, why would you do that? Why would you take your life over a failed relationship? And at that point, it was kind of an awakening for me where I realized I was being a hypocrite because I actually started contemplating suicide. Started when I knew that things weren't working out, and just the idea of losing my family and not being able to see my kids all the time, I just couldn't face that pain anymore. And as a police officer, we already deal with a lot of things. And as a police officer, we tend to internalize things and hold everything in. And I just had all this mounting pressure, and I just felt like I couldn't deal with it anymore. So at that point, I decided that, I started planning my own death. Um, I knew, as an investigator, what they would be looking for. I wanted my death to be ruled an accidental death and not a suicide, because I was thinking about my kids and my mom, just getting my life insurance money. Just kind of going through that trying time. That would have to be the lowest point in my life.
Sergeant Chris, what can I ask you specifically? Like, how were you going to commit suicide?
Well, being that I was an avid fisherman and diver, oftentimes I would go night diving a lot by myself. And people would tell me, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? But I have just such a love for the ocean and fishing and diving that I would take those chances. And ultimately, what I was planning was I started checking the weather, the tides, the currents, just trying to pick an ideal time once I had things situated as far as planning what my mom and my kids were going to get. Ultimately, what I was going to do, I planned on doing like a shallow water blackout, essentially going night diving and putting myself in a dangerous situation where most fishermen wouldn't put themselves into. And in my mind, I saw it playing out as, that I went diving and that I had drowned doing something that I loved.
Sergeant Chris, what did Carlos Ocasio do?
So Carlos Ocasio was someone that I used to work with in the police department, and he left while I was going through my divorce. I had moved out of my home, and I moved to a small little apartment, and I guess he had known or just saw some cues that maybe I had posted maybe on my social media or what have you. And he had reached out to me one day, says, hey, I have this extra desk. You think your daughter would want this desk? And at that time, I had moved out of my brand new home into a little apartment, and I needed that furniture. So I met with him, and he gave me this desk, and I thanked him. And the next day, he calls me up, and he says, "Hey, Chris, I have this book I want you to read, and I want to give it to you. It's my friend wrote this book." And in my mind, I'm thinking, dude, I'm planning my death. Like, I don't have time for this book. But he was such a nice guy, and his heart was in the right place, and he had just given me this desk, and I thought, I'm going to meet him. So I went to his apartment and got the book, and I thanked him, and I came home and I cooked dinner for my daughters. And I remember sitting down on the sofa looking at the book, and I looked in the back, and I read, about you and about tennis. And no offense, Rusty, but I was like, tennis? Like, I don't care about tennis. I'm not a tennis fan. So the last thing I want to read is about tennis. But I thought just something told me, he felt like it's important that I read this book. And so I did. And as soon as I opened up the book and I started reading, I just was I can't even explain the feeling. It was just something, I was just so drawn to it. The chapter 1, it talks about choices. And although this book is about your coaching philosophies, but I found that things in there just applied to everyday life. For instance, for that choice is, the choice, we all get knocked down in life, but it's our choice to get back up and move on. And I started reading on, and it talks about control your thoughts, and then welcoming adversity. And the more I kept reading this book, I started to feel like this actually pertains to me, for everyone, and just in their everyday lives. And I kept reading on, and it talks about being resilient. And, the chapter about resiliency, you talk about, once again, getting knocked down, but it's how you come back stronger. And that's resiliency. So the more I kept reading this, I started being more and more empowered. And it's just strange. You just talk about the timing, because I was in such a bad place in my life. Once again, I was a homicide detective. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and that time, the previous coordinator had announced her retirement. I was at the academy, and she says, "Hey, Chris, I know you're going through something rough right now, but you should consider leaving homicide and taking over this Crime Stoppers program." Initially, I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm not doing that. I hate talking to people. I don't want to speak in front of large groups. I don't want to speak in front of a camera. I don't want to do that's not police work." I was just like this hardcore detective, just wanting to solve cases, solve murders. And now I'm being told, like, why don't you look into this more of a PR, public relations type of thing where you're going to be out there speaking to the community. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. But once I read your book and it talks about all these things and taking on new challenges, and I just thought, you know what, I need to maybe consider doing this. And I did. I put my name in a hat. But unfortunately, at that time, I wasn't selected. And I remember just feeling a little disheartened. It was something that that was a new challenge I wanted to take on at that time. But I just thought, okay, well, it's not in God's plan for me at that time. And I remember the next day I got called out to a suicide over in the Neo Valley area. Someone had committed suicide, pretty gruesome scene. He had shot himself with a gun, and his widow had found him. And I remember just going out there and just trying to do my job, but I just felt so sorry for her. But it was a scene that I've seen so many times. Unfortunately, in my capacity as a homicide detective, we do respond to these suicides. But in any case, as I'm wrapping things up, she then asked who was going to clean the mess up in the garage. And I said that she would have to contact a biohazard company and they would come out there. In the meantime, she had asked if I could pull the car out of the garage because he had committed suicide in the garage, and it was a bloody mess. So I said, yeah, no problem. And I remember backing her car out of the garage, cleaning the driveway. And as I'm walking back towards the house to give her the key, I get a phone call. And they say, Chris, you have a suicide in Mililani as a 17-year-old female that had committed suicide. And that was my next case. And I went up, I gave her the key, and I says, ma'am, sorry for your loss, but I need to go now. I have another case I need to go to. And she started sobbing, saying they're not answering the phone. And I said, you just got to keep trying, ma'am. I apologize, but you just got to keep trying. I remember going back to my car, sitting down. As I started the ignition, I just sat there and I looked at her sitting on her porch and just so distraught, just crying. And I just felt my heart just went out to her because obviously I was going through something traumatic too at that time. I shut my engine off and I went back to her and I said, ma'am, do you have any garbage bags, some towels? And she's like, why? And I said, because I'll clean up the mess for you. And she kind of looked at me just kind of in shock. And she ended up giving me the garbage bags and the towels. And I remember just being in the garage and just wiping all this up. And at that point, I told myself that I was done. I was done being a homicide detective because I become so desensitized. Cleaning up these brains and blood, it didn't bother me. And I told myself that this isn't good for me. This isn't good for my mental health. This isn't good for me. I'm going through this divorce process. I need to look into something else different. And at that point, I started to tell myself, okay, I'm going to transfer out. I need to find some other division to go into. And the next day, I get a call. I'm at my desk and my captain comes in and he tells me, come in the office. And I thought, oh, what is this all about? Because I was going through a pretty bad divorce. It was a year-long process. And he tells me, come in and close the door. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this isn't good. And he looks at me and says, do you want the Crime Stoppers program? And I said, I thought you gave it to such and such. And he says, you know what? There's been a change of plans. If you want it, it's yours. And at that point, I kind of teared up and I said, Cap, just yesterday, I had this case and I literally told myself that I was done with homicide and I was going to transfer out of the division. And he says, well, you have the program now. And Rusty, I got to tell you, I was so thankful for reading your book. It changed my mindset. And it also made me accept this new challenge to step out of my comfort zone. So now from a detective, I'm now the coordinator for Crime Stoppers. And with Kim Buffett, she took it to such a great level. And I thought, how do I improve on this? So I literally just sat I would show up to work and I would look at things, and I started taking on new projects. I started stepping out of my comfort zone. And I just started running with the program. I put all my focus into it. Um, my divorce wrapped up. I became a single father of 2 daughters, a new position with Crime Stoppers, and I just gave all my heart and soul into it. And in 2019, I was invited to be a guest speaker at the Crime Stoppers USA National Conference in Tempe, Arizona. Crime Stoppers, we are affiliated with this huge Crime Stoppers organization. There are over 350 plus organizations in the mainland US, Puerto Rico, Guam, parts of Canada. And I was there as a guest speaker because they wanted me to speak about the success that we were having, just the different facets with the Animal Crime Stoppers program, the Student Crime Stoppers program, the Crime Stoppers program, and our volunteer program. So I was out there speaking, and one of the nights they had in the ballroom, they had an award ceremony where they would announce the award, the national award for the top coordinator for the nation. And I was sitting in the corner. I was a little jet lagged. I wasn't feeling too well. And I remember sitting at that table, and the president of the national organization started talking about this coordinator had basically did this coordinator's doing this. And I remember sitting at the table thinking, wow, this guy is good. And the more they talked about this coordinator, I thought, wow, this guy's copying me. And the people at my table were looking at me, and the Texas people were saying, Chris, hey, buddy, I think they're talking about you. And I was like, no way. And then she says, ladies and gentlemen, the 2019 Crime Stoppers USA National Coordinator of the Year, Sergeant Chris Kim from Honolulu, Hawaii. And just my heart just sank. I couldn't comprehend what was going on. I remember walking up to the podium and just seeing this sea of people, standing ovation, clapping their hands. And I just started tearing up, and I just said, if you guys only knew what I went through 2 years ago. And to be here, to receive this national award, it was just, wow, it's like so surreal. But it was just, I came back and I was just so thankful, but I realized what I forgot to mention is after reading your book, I told myself it's all mindset. You mentioned that in there. It's all mindset. And I welcomed this adversity that I was facing. And I wanted to be resilient. And I told myself, stop being so negative, stop being so sad, stop feeling so sorry for myself. No matter what, we all get knocked down in life. We've all got to get up and move on. We got to keep living. At one point, I wanted to take the easy way out, but I had to look at my positives that, like you mentioned, and my positives were my 2 daughters. I had to be there for them. I want to see them grow up, and I wanted them to have that father figure in their life. So once again, I stopped being angry. I accepted, the circumstances, the cards that I was dealt with, and I made it a mission to be resilient and to bounce back. So I changed my mindset. I went from being this negative, woe is me, mad at the world, to I'm going to bounce back from this. I'm going to be even better. And I'm going to give it my all. Because at the end of the day, I want my kids to be proud of me. And I just want to show everybody that nothing was going to stop me. So once again, once I changed my mindset, I took on these new challenges, and all of a sudden, Rusty, it's strange, but just all these doors started opening, doors after doors. For one, getting that national award, coming back, and then getting recognized by the city and county of Honolulu with my family there. I received an award there, and then getting invited to the state capitol. And even that was so surreal too, being at the state capitol, receiving this award in front of my kids, in front of my mom. It was just, words can't even explain what I was feeling. And not only that, Rusty, other doors were, now I'm being asked to have speaking roles on Hawaii 5-0. NCIS Hawaii, Magnum PI. Had all these television appearances. I made the cover of Midweek. For a local boy, that's huge. Because I remember as a kid, I would check the mail and see who was on the Midweek cover, and I'll read about them. And now all of a sudden, I'm on this Midweek cover. But my point being is, once I stopped being mad, stop being angry, start changing my mindset, start controlling my emotions and my thoughts, doors after doors just started opening.
Well, Sergeant Chris, thank God for Carlos Ocasio
Yes.
giving you the desk and then giving you the book.
Yes.
He's a great friend of mine. He's such a great guy. He's always wanting to help others. Shortly after you had read the book, I was at an event in Waikiki, and I remember you coming up to me saying, "Coach Rusty, I read your book, and it literally changed my life. Do you have time to meet for lunch or dinner?" And I said, "Sure." So you and I went to lunch the following week, and you shared the whole story to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was over 6 years ago now. And I've been with you along the way. And it's just, there's no words for me to explain how proud I am of you. The impact that you have made in helping our community. I mean, in inspiring so many people. You sharing your story right now is going to save so many people's lives. And I want to ask you, Sergeant Chris, why did you decide to share your story publicly for the first time now?
Rusty, it's such a taboo subject, especially in law enforcement, where we're not supposed to talk about these things, and it's tragic, it's sad, but especially in law enforcement, it's something that we deal with, and we're not supposed to talk about. And at that time, I thought about it, I planned it, just short of executing it, because I came across your book, and like you had mentioned, yes, as soon as I saw you, I want to thank you. I want to thank you because you truly, Carlos, give me the book, but then just by reading your book and the words that you put in there, it truly resounded with me, and I took everything to heart. And to this day, both personally and professionally, and I live by your philosophies in there. I try and practice it every day. But the reason why I came on with it is because it's happening. Whether or not people want to accept it or acknowledge it, it is happening. I've seen it in my line of work as a homicide detective. The amount of suicides that happen on this island, in the nation, for various circumstances, especially with students, them being bullied. So even with my line of work with the Student Crime Stoppers program, we go out to the communities, we speak at the different schools, and we talk to kids about bullying. We also do touch upon suicides, where I tell them that, look, we all go through adversities in life. You're going to face all kinds of adversities and hard times, but just know that things get better. I didn't believe it at the time when people kept telling me that things are going to get better, but I've lived it. And I tell these kids that no matter what you're going through right now, no matter how challenging life may be, just know that it's temporary. It rains and storms today, but it's not going to rain and storm every day. Sooner or later, like you say in your book, the blue skies are going to come out. And that's something I had to believe. And now that I survived it, I'm able to go and speak to these kids, as well as other people. I've had people come up to me and had said, I heard you went through some trying times. You have any advice? And at that point, I tell them. So that's why I'm coming out with it now, just to let people know. From the outside looking in, people think, wow, Sergeant Chris Kim, Crime Stoppers, he's doing a good job. I see him on TV, I see him on the news, but they don't know how I got here and the whole backstory. And that 6 years ago, I was looking back on it. If I never came across your book, I wouldn't be here today. Thankfully, I read your book and had a good support group with my friends and family as well. And then that's truly important. Friends and family, just having a good support group, I had people checking up on me. So I'm very thankful for that too. But yeah, just people need to know that this is happening. But people also need to know that although this is happening, that if you're going through it, just know that things get better. You have to believe that things get better. And it's all mindset. The mind is truly a powerful thing. So I just want to share that with you.
Well, Sergeant Chris, since I wrote the first book, including you, 5 adults have come to me sharing your same story. And I thought to myself, I have to get the books out into the community. I had no idea that the books would help people with mental health issues of depression and suicide. So I did a big book donation to Damien's school, and the president absolutely loved it. He could give it to the students, teachers, coaches, administrators. Ultimately, the books would go home with the families, and the whole family unit would get impacted. Mm-hmm. And then people started asking me, how can we help you? We love your books. I said, do you want to donate books to a school? Dr. Tommy Sakota was the first one. And I said, and he said, yes, I want to help you. You choose the school. So now I have over 35 individuals that have helped donate my books to over 40 schools and organizations so far.
That's amazing.
To really try to inspire hope, excellence, try to improve everyone's mental fitness, because there's physical fitness, but people need to know that no matter who you are, we need to work on building their mental fitness. What are your thoughts about that?
I agree 100%. And once again, this is such a taboo subject. We need to recognize and realize that this is real. It's happening. Many of us, many of your viewers, I'm sure, have experienced it as far as losing a friend or family due to suicide and mental health issues. And I agree, it needs to be changed to mental fitness, where you're able to accept and tell yourself that this is just part of life. You're going to get knocked down, but you got to get back up. You got to keep trying. And that's all with mental fitness. Just putting the word out there that life gets better. And your book truly embodies that. Once again, I didn't know what to expect. I just knew that I didn't like tennis and I didn't want to read a book on tennis. But once again, it's your philosophies and the things that you put in there just applies to all of us in our daily lives. And I just want to truly thank you for that.
Well, Sergeant Chris, organizations and companies can hire you as a keynote speaker to really speak on a whole spectrum of topics, including mindset, dealing with adversities, challenges, leadership, building teams, everything. And I want to really ask our viewers to share this show with everybody you know on text message, email, social media, because we never know who might be suffering in silence and bleeding in places that we can't see. And Sergeant Chris, do you have any other additional comments before we wrap up?
I just want to say, Rusty, just thank you again for your books, but just let the viewers know that if you're going through something in your life right now, just know it's going to get better. We all go through adversities in life, but it's how we overcome those adversities that eventually define who we are. And I'm proud to say that I survived those dark times. And, there's still going to be bumps in the road. I still go through bumps in the road now. I still go through those seasons now. But going through something like that, it has now empowered me, has strengthened me, where I'm able to face these new adversities in life and just move on and accept those challenges. And speaking along the lines of challenges, I challenge everyone out there to step out of your comfort zone, take on new challenges, challenge yourself, because you just may surprise yourself.
Sergeant Chris, thank you for your bravery and courage for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Beyond the Lines on ThinkTech Hawaii. For more information, please visit rustykomori.com, and my books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I hope that Sergeant Chris and I will inspire you to create your own superior culture of excellence and to find your greatness and help others find theirs. Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.